a nonprofit exhibition space and residency program. We've been around for 10 years. Mostly what we do is provide exhibition, professional development, and other kind of, we do grants as well, to Chicago artists. And, but I thought that I would start by, let's see, okay. Sorry, let me get my bearings here. Okay, so what we're going to be talking about today is a discussion about current and potential operational models, how to strengthen local and global networks, and how to support the informal and formal goals of experimental cultural centers. So we're going to be having both a nuts and bolts kind of conversation, but also a more conceptual one with people. And I know that one of the things with the announcement of this panel is people that either run an artist space or are interested in running one. So think of all of us here as a resource for you, so that if you have any questions about ideas you have about starting a space, or you're struggling with something in particular, this would be a great place to ask those questions. So because we're really excited, we really run a broad spectrum of different kinds of artist-run projects here in Chicago. I'm going to let people introduce themselves mostly, and then I'm going to give a little introduction myself first. But we have Nick Wiley, who's here from Baker, which is Artist Residency Cooperative Exhibitions, which is both a project space in Pilsen and an artist residency that's based in Steuben, Wisconsin. And we have Michelle Gradner from Spurgeon, which is an exhibition space that's based out in Oak Park. And we have Laura Schaefer from Southside Hub of Production, which is a cultural center, hub, exhibition space, activity space, community space based in Hyde Park. And then we have Duguid from Clutch Gallery, which is an exhibition space in her first. So we're going to hear from everybody and explain, they're going to talk about their work, and then we'll get into it. But I thought I would give a little introduction on my background, and just the things that I've done, mostly because a lot of the questions that I'm interested in my research and my work has been about how to support artist-run spaces in general. And thinking about alternative support networks, thinking about, you know, the core questions that are part of this description, like local networks, but also global ones, and, you know, what are those relationships like, and what are the conditions in which we build them. So I moved to Chicago 7 years ago, and as a graduate student to study in the art administration policy and art history program. And quickly I started an exhibition, I started a space with a couple other people called Incubate. And Incubate stood for Institute for Community Understanding Between Art and Everyday. And the reason that we started this space is because we were art administration students and we were interested in a learning environment that was outside of school and connecting with artists that were living here and sort of having a conversation in a space outside of school, because it felt like we really needed to test out our ideas out in public. And we also were really, so this is something that we're going to talk about, I hope, a little bit in the discussion, is the decision when artists start to, when they build spaces, whether or not they want to become nonprofit or not, because that is a really important decision in terms of formalizing yourself, in terms of where you're going to go for support, how you're going to organize yourself. Our decision to start a space, we decided to not be a 501c3, because as graduate students and as learning about the process of administration, it felt really important to keep that open and to organize ourselves in what we saw as a hierarchical way that also, you know, nonprofits are about, amongst many other things, and I work at one now and very much support the, that kind of organizational structure. You have to have a long-term plan, you have to think about growth, you have to think about sustainability, and we were looking for a venue for more of an experimental project. And so it felt to us at that moment that having a 501c3 space was not something that we were interested in. But you can go to the next slide. But in order to figure out how to support ourselves, we didn't really, you know, we didn't have a reserve of cash, and so we had to come up with a bunch of other solutions. One of those was we had a residency program in the space, and we invited people to come and live there for 1 to 3 months.
and do projects with us, because it was a very open network. We also shared office space with Area Chicago and Chicago Underground Library. So all of these were kind of solutions about, you know, all of us paying in rent, all of us fundraising together, sort of, you know, just trying all these different strategies, because really we only needed to raise about $1,000 a month. And so that was the way that we kept our space going. So one of the projects that has extended and had a really a much larger life is one of the things that happened is that artists said to us, you know, well, you guys are not interested in being a 501c3. I'm an artist, I need money for my project, what do I do? And so we decided to start this thing called Sunday Soup. Sunday Soup was a community meal. We started doing it once a week. It started as once a week and then moved into once a month. But it was a community meal that raised money for creative projects. Basically what it was is that we invited anybody to submit proposals, and then everybody that came to the meal and paid between $5 and $10 got one vote in who got the grant. And through this process, we were both able to raise about $200, you know, give or take. You can see it's a pretty small space, so 45 people about could fit in there. And so we were able to raise money, but we also used it as a presentation space, as a networking space, to sort of have, you know, this kind of convivial situation, talk about what people locally were working on, other ways that we could support each other. This was before Kickstarter and all these other platforms, and I hope we can talk about that too, how people feel about those things. So anyway, so this was a project we continued for a couple years, and then what happened was, through having a residency program, through organizing a lot of activities in the space, a lot of people, am I talking too fast? Talk fast, no, okay. A lot of people ended up starting this project in other places. That was something that we were really interested in, sort of extending this as an open invitation to all sorts of different contexts. And so what you see here, this is a picture of other people in the Sunday Soup network that do the project. So there's about 65 to 70 that are currently operating nationally and internationally. They operate at many different scales. So this is 4 years ago. So this is people from Portland, Buffalo, Detroit, Ann Arbor, Philadelphia, New York, and Baltimore. In this picture, we got together in Portland 2008 to kind of share strategies and talk about things. And then this is a picture of it in Philadelphia. So Philly Steak has it. They have about 350 people come. They raise a couple $1,000s. So it really operates at different scales in different places. So you can go past this stuff. And so, you know, through various projects, I've been interested in this kind of like alternative network building. So this is just a slide of a thing that I organized in 2008 with a bunch of other people called We Want More. And it was artists that kind of we held it at Co-Prosperity Sphere, and we just invited a bunch of artists, activists, people that we knew from across the country to come together and have a conversation about what kind of support structures we want. So we can go past this. And so just to talk currently about, you can stop here, what I do at Three Walls, amongst other things, is last year we put out a book called Phone Book that's over at the table for sale, and it's a listing of artist-run spaces and projects and events and residencies and community resources from across the country. There's about did I say that? There's 750, there's essays by people that run them. So it's another kind of resource that we're doing through Three Walls in order to kind of spread information about what people are up to. Things that I learned about through doing Sunday Soup, other kind of regions and how artists are dealing with their particular economic situations there. And then this was a conference that we organized in last year. And it was about kind of history of alternative spaces in this country and where people are at now. So again, like I hope the conversation that we can have here, which is just, you know, the funding climate has changed significantly. People are having to come up with other solutions in terms of how they stay open and how they share resources. So with this one, we had over 200 people come from across the country to kind of, you know, share their stories and talk about what they were up to. And then had a bunch of brainstorming groups. I'm going to stop there and let other people talk. But
I think technically that means it's...
Okay. Okay, let's go.
I think that technically means it's my turn, or Nick is going to be speaking for my space. Either way. I'm Meg Duguid, and I have been running Clutch Gallery, which is a 25 square inch gallery located in the heart of my purse. We can go to the first slide. I bought Clutch Gallery for $5 on eBay in 2009. I had just moved back from New York. I'd been in Chicago, and I'd been in New York for 7 years, and then I moved back. And when I came back, I did the classic Chicago thing. I opened my own space. But I did it in my space, which was my purse. I'm a performance artist, so this was actually an extension of my practice. It wasn't intended to be an alternative space that would morph into a 501c3, although it would be really funny to have a 501c3 in my purse until you realize how little I can carry. But it really intended for me to have a regular conversation about art with people I buy things from. Or I open my purse and I need a tissue. And boom, there's a piece of art. And all of these artists were really willing to join me for that ride. So this is what the purse looked like when I bought it. It had strawberries all over it, and it was Mod Podge. So if we can go to the next, and the inside was really, really easy to take out. It wasn't. So I actually sanded the thing down and refinished it. And then added my 25 square inch white cube, literally in the heart of the purse. So the two side pockets are where I kept all of my items. So I was down to a cell phone, a keys, and my wallet, which you can actually see in this piece. This is Adam Sipes' Google Fresh Grapes, where he actually had me carry fresh grapes in my purse for a month. And the idea is that people would take a grape, eat the grape, and then go home and Google fresh grapes. And it was kind of this idea, not only is he a painter, so grapes are always a part of the painting diaspora, let's say, but also that the grapes were constantly decaying while Google was constantly changing and updating. I had a number of artists. I first started out with Clutch and intended it to be a year-long project. And I invited artists that I knew, for the most part, for the first 6 months, people who I thought could really kind of deal with like the unique properties of the space. Because my space might flip upside down on my bicycle in my bag. Or it will constantly have people with dirty hands reaching into it. It affected my life too, because I carried my birth control around for approximately the first 6 weeks. And then the 5th or 6th time that someone reached into my purse and goes, "What's this?" And I'm like, "You're holding my birth control." That became unfunny for me after a little while, a little too personal. This is Matt King. He gave me day and evening pieces. So on the left is There. That was my day piece, and on the right was Have I Told You Lately That I Love You? And it was actually kind of playing off the materials that one might find glued up in the bottom of your purse. Go to the next one. This is Jessica Peterson's piece. She gave me, I always tried to at least get one photo with my wallet in it, because that was a really important thing. There were no openings for the space, so to speak, because it was my purse. It wasn't opening for their purse. So I would usually just announce the show, and if I was at another gallery and you knew I had the purse, you could ask me to see it, but for the most part it was really intended to forge relationships with the folks at Intelligentsia, followed it often. I had a regular date at Fluvog, and that was the thing, is the purse itself, I like to think, was quite handsome. And so if someone stopped me on the street and said, "I really like your purse," I'd go, "It's my gallery. Here, we're just going to kind of go through to the next one because I don't want to run over my time." This was my first group show. It's Carmel Softy and Emily Roz. But if someone asked me, said, "I like your purse," I would go, "Oh, it's my gallery." And immediate confusion would wash over their face. I mean, "You're what?" And I'd open it up and I'd go, "Clutch Gallery is a 25 square inch gallery located in the heart of my purse." Still blank looks. And then we'd have a real conversation about like what a museum is and what a gallery is and what the artists were kind of doing in my purse. And this piece specifically was about kind of luck, love, and being well accessorized in New York. These women actually collaborate regularly, and you can see and the paintings were very kind of, especially the rabbit's foot was really kind of lovely and like lickable. So that kind of helped with the idea of like, the constant keychains that are in purses. All right, we can go to the next slide. This is Trevor Gaynor's. This was actually, I had a guest curator in my first year, Shannon Stratton, who gave me Trevor Gaynor. This is a 12-pound meteorite, if we can go to the next one. So because the meteorite was 12 pounds and I thought was gonna ruin the space, I had him give me an over-the-shoulder boulder holder, and I told him I was gonna call it that in the press release. And so he hid Clutch in a fake Chanel bag. And I mean, one of the things about that piece is it actually destroyed the whole gallery while it was in my bike basket. It was in the summer, and in my bike basket it would kind of rotate so like the walls were all pushed out, so I did a post-mortem for it. So I actually, again, like this was really kind of based in my performative history, me kind of figuring out how Chicago responds to things and how I respond to carrying something every day. So that's the first postmortem I wrote about the piece and what it did and how many extra calories I burned on my bike. Because when your bike is 12 pounds front loaded, like on a 6-mile ride, that's like, for those of you who bike, that's kind of insane and you really don't want to hit a pothole. I did do video. This is Danielle Ash's piece. I'm gonna kind of flip through somewhat quickly because I realize I have a lot of images and not much time to speak. This is a still of her video. So it was shown on the iPod along with the things that made the animation. So people could rifle through the purse while watching the animation. And that was what was supposed to round out my first year. And at the end of the first year, I realized that there were things that I had not figured out yet. Like number one, it was I kind of thought, I found that Clutch was this like, I was always sitting a gallery, yet never sitting a gallery. And I found that a confusing conundrum, because I'm always sitting gallery hours, because I'm always with my purse, right? But I'm not really sitting gallery hours until someone asks me to open my purse, or I happen to open my purse. I found that it was taking over my life performatively in ways that I kind of didn't expect, in terms of like, I needed to clear out my wallet more often and clear out my business cards. And when my phone broke and I got a new phone, I didn't realize my phone was gonna be too big to fit both my keys, my phone, and my wallet in there, because I had measured that perfectly for my old phone, but now phones have gotten bigger. So I had to figure out like an alternate way to carry my phone. And then there were still some things that I felt like were unexplored, and at that point I had started to get proposals from artists as well. So there were a couple that I found really interesting, people who really kind of understood the spirit of the space. So I continued it for a second year, and also it occurred to me that this is a functional accessory, right? And you don't throw away shoes until they wear out. So why would I get rid of my purse until it wears out? So I thought for sure it would break in the second year, and like then the piece would be over. So moving into my second year, I had Tom Burton wood. And this piece actually extended 8 feet up out of the purse. And this is, oh, go ahead. This is Sue Havens. This is Hot Dots, and Hot Dots was created when Fine Lines was stolen. Hot Dots was the second piece that she created for the purse. I think you can actually go to the, oh no, I didn't put an image of that in. Her piece was actually ready and boxed up. The piece was very similar, but it was painted all of these lines. It was boxed up in her car in Brooklyn, and she was ready to mail it to me. She went to teach her class, and she came back, and her car was gone, along with the piece to me. So she made me this, oh, sorry, back one. This piece that was a little more somber, yet she'd like to think of it as cautiously optimistic. And in the run of the show, they recovered her car that was completely stripped, and the box to me was open. And the note saying, you know, here's my piece, Meg, and this is how you can install it, was still on the seat, but the piece was gone. So I like to think that now there's a car thief who has also participated in Clutch Gallery, and now Sue's piece is in the Car Thief's collection, courtesy of Clutch Gallery. So that's, again, like another kind of extension of like how the performance in my mind functions. Someone's gonna holler at me if I go over time, right? This was the piece where I finally got to interact with my favorite people in the world, the Secret Service. I actually took Clutch on the plane a couple times and never had a problem with TSA. And for my job, I was invited to Rahm Emanuel's inauguration, and which wouldn't have been that big of a deal except Joe Biden was there, and evidently the Secret Service thinks they have to protect him like he's a political figure. So the Secret Service is no TSA, mind you. You get in line with the Secret Service and they go through your bag and they open up glass cases to make sure you really have glass cases, and they open up lipstick cases and like they roll out the lipstick to make sure like not only the top of the lipstick is really lipstick, but the bottom of the lipstick is really lipstick. And so I roll in with Ian Muirhead's Reliquary for a Snowball. This thing was going in my purse in my freezer every night. He had saved snow from Snowmageddon and gave me this reliquary for a snowball, and kind of had put this video piece in. You can see his hand clutching. That was the top of the reliquary. This video would kind of play over it, and it was him kind of gathering the snow. And so each night the purse would go back into my freezer to keep the cooling gel cold so I could then carry it around all day. So the purse sweat, and I'm in line with Secret Service, and the woman looks at me and I'm like, it's Clutch Gallery, it's a 25 square inch gallery located in the heart of my purse. You can look it up if you have a smartphone. I need to get my manager, she says to me, and she goes and gets another Secret Service guy, and I do the same thing. I'm like, oh my God, it's Clutch Gallery, it's 25 square inch gallery located in the heart of my purse. This is a reliquary for a snowball, and I kind of explain the whole piece. And he looks at me like I'm crazy, and thinks really long and hard that a terrorist would not make up such a story, and sends me to the bomb-sniffing dog, and has me put down the purse, put the purse down, and the guy's like, step back, ma'am. And the bomb-sniffing dog sniffs the purse, and he goes, okay, you can go. And it's good, because my boss, I'm sure, really appreciated waiting 15 minutes for that to happen. So like those were the kinds of, that was a really kind of unexpected moment, but it's also one of my really kind of favorite moments. I'd like to believe that at least one of those Secret Service agents looked me up afterwards, which would occasionally happen. Every now and then I would see someone at like Starbucks, and they would write in on the blog that I kept. I don't have a website, I have a blog, saying, I saw you this morning and I'm really, really glad, and thanks for showing this to me, and they'd follow me or follow me on Facebook. So this is Nicole Northaway. I'm now just going to kind of swing through a few. This is Rich Mansfield, who really liked the fact that I had Clutch on my bike often. This is Judith Brotman. This was kind of like a loose leaf folio called Summer Idol, where she wrote many machines that she would build. This one is like, I will build a machine out of wood and paint it the color of overripe peach. It will remind me of Summer Idol, but no one else will see it that way. And Summer Idol was the piece in the show. And again, it was really, people would rifle through. And that was so much about the interaction, was people could really put their hands in my purse and have an artistic experience. This was the last show that I curated. It's Jason Dunda. You can keep going through for a couple. This is Jason Dunda Boîte and Valise, which is named after the Duchamp piece, where he, box in a case, I believe is how it's translated. I'll go back one. This is the last show I fully carried, and he remade the place where he makes art and stuck it in my purse. It's his one-room studio that he's lived in for the last 12 years, and he remade little pieces. And over that time, at this point, I knew I didn't want to carry the purse anymore, and damn it, it didn't break. So someone was like, why don't you just get an intern to carry it? And I was like, oh, interns. And then I'm like, I like paying people. So I kind of decided to start lending it to other people. And just kind of off whim, I was like, okay, I'm gonna lend my gallery space out to curate. And this kind of lovely woman took my last show, go ahead. This is Paul Hopkins' Greenswoggle, and they're kind of all handmade lettuce pieces about the way green is is labeled or therefore, you just call it green and automatically it's supposed to be organic or something. So there are these handmade things. And this is, go ahead, you can go. On my way to fetch clutch. This is Emma Robbins. This is the woman who took my purse from the December of 2011, and she actually took it to Buenos Aires, which is why she took my last show. She's like, I'm going to Buenos Aires. And I was like, yes, this is how it gets through TSA Best. And then she curated 3 shows over the last 6 months. This is The Beach. Well, you could just go through these pretty quickly. This is Lynn Bassa. And then, I guess I only have 2 of them. And now Clutch is currently closed for installation. I am handing it over to Paul Hopkin next week, who's going to put a 7-person show into Clutch. Just for scale, this is the space. The handle's currently taped up because I just finished refinishing the outside, and I'm now working on the inside. And then Jeffrey Grawl is going to be carrying it. So he will be the first male carrier of Clutch, with kind of the largest show in Clutch. At the end of November, approximately when I get it back, I will be announcing the Clutch Gallery Lending Program and making it official that I want a quarterly lending program where curators can apply to curate and carry my purse. And that's kind of a really great next iteration because it clearly hasn't broken yet. And I don't have the love for carrying it. Like I found what I needed performatively from it personally, but it's kind of a nice way for it to move on. And each curator will hopefully give me an essay when they're done. I've actually written an essay that I'm actually presenting in North Carolina next month, and then each curator subsequently is required to give me a piece of writing because the plan for archiving it is it's a 7x7 book, so the 5x5 square and the 5x5 footprint will be life size in a catalog. So I mean that's the other thing is like the scale makes it. I can have like a real scale catalog, and that's kind of where I am.
Thanks. Hey folks, I'm Michelle Grabner. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Port Farm and the Suburban. The Suburban, you can go to the next image. The Suburban is in Oak Park. We opened that in 1999, but first we're going to talk about the current exhibition. Thanks, Tempest. The current exhibition that's at the Poor Farm. So what is the Poor Farm? The Poor Farm it's a large exhibition space in northeastern Wisconsin. It's about 50 miles west of Green Bay. It is a not-for-profit exhibition space. It also has a building attached to it, which we use it as a dormitory. People often ask if it's a residency, and it's not that. I'm not interested in being official that way. So people who have good ideas, like the University of Minnesota's graduate sculpture seminar wants to take it for a week in March, they're welcome to it. This past summer, we had 3 interns from MCAD. We're bringing groups in, interfacing with groups from Virginia Commonwealth and Rice University next year. So it does have this dormitory space as well. The exhibition that's up, the primary exhibition is a Gretchen Bender exhibition. It's a historical survey. Gretchen Bender was an artist who died in 2004. This exhibition will last for a year, as do all exhibitions at the Poor Farm. They always open the first week in August. They run through June of the following year. This exhibition is going to be traveling to the New Museum in New York as soon as it leaves us, and then it'll go on to the Tate Modern, and then it'll go on to the Kunsthalle Bern. We did not see that or anticipate this. We don't build exhibitions, so they travel to these other institutions. I came to Gretchen Bender's work when I was a grad student in art history in the late 80s, and I recently curated an exhibition at a gallery in New York called Marianne Boesky, looking at basically the picture generation artists. And I did a lot of research on that project, and Gretchen Bender came to the fore. So here's some exhibitions. Basically, she deals with television media, You're not going to be able to read that. But anyways, there's a catalog that's coming out accompanying it. Gretchen Bender and Robert Longo work together in a lot of music videos. So the catalog will include exhibitions by, will include interviews with Robert Longo, Rurka Terabanish, who was her studio assistant at the time, David Robbins, Tim Griffin, who is at the kitchen, and so forth. So that's what's going on there. I encourage you to come and see it. It's a pretty important survey exhibition. These works have not been recreated since their original performance at the kitchen in the 80s, the late 80s. And they are performances. So in other words, it's hard to see, but there's bleacher seating in the foreground. So they're not continuous videos at all. So that's what's up at the Poor Farm right now. We can keep going. So there's a handful of, and this is, so there's upstairs spaces. So the Poor Farm, a little bit about the Poor Farm, I think that's important. We purchased the Poor Farm in 2008, and it's, all but a half a mile away from a studio and a cottage that we have. This is a part of Wisconsin that I grew up in, so I know it very well. But the Poor Farm, some of you are familiar with poor farms or poor houses. They're part of the American Poor Farm system. So 1850, if one was destitute, one would be sent to the Poor Farm to work. Our particular Poor Farm hosted mostly men, as did most of the Poor Farms. There's a handful of women who would keep the kitchen and so forth. If one had children, they would be shipped off to the orphanage. It was seen as very progressive at the time, where one basically had to work for their means. And then they dissolved in the 30s when the American Social Security Act came into play. But there's a graveyard attached to this particular Poor Farm. There's a suicide row. People committed suicide when they were on the Poor Farm pretty regularly. So it's a whole social system. It's part of a whole social system. And there are several artists here in the audience who actually have participated in the Poor Farm in various ways. I'm looking at two of them right now. Okay, next. And the Suburban. So the Suburban, we launched the Suburban in January of 1999. So we're well over 10 years right now. And if you come visit us, you will see right now, we just opened a show on Sunday by the LA-based artist Kelly Poe. Kelly Poe, she's a mid-career artist who went through, you can see a picture of her. Go to the next one, please. So Kelly's in the middle. And this is kind of the classic quintessential suburban space. It's the 10-foot by 10-foot square, not much larger than Clutch, actually. And then there's a building to the left, and that has two other exhibition spaces, 10 by 20 square feet, and then another one, the same footprint, that we give over to Shane Campbell Gallery, who is a commercial space here in the city. So there are 3 exhibition spaces if you come to visit us in Oak Park. A little bit about what Kelly ended up doing here. In the small space, what you see is a collection of drawings by the self-taught artist named Marie Mason. And Marie Mason is incarcerated right now in Texas. She's an eco-terrorist. She blew up a Monsanto lab. And she has a 21-year sentence, the longest sentence ever given to this kind of action. So there's a big push to get a legal team attached to her and see what we can do. And anyways, Kelly ended up collecting these drawings that she makes in jail that she sends out to people. And then can you go back one, please? And then in the larger space, what Kelly did is you have a very large book here that is a compilation of documents that she acquired while she was doing her research on Marie. And then there's a big, gigantic wall. It's basically wallpaper of this landscape, and it's Lake Michigan. And this is what Marie thinks about when she's in jail. She was from Michigan, and she was actually sentenced in a Michigan court. So this is an image. So what Kelly does is she's in contact with all these eco-terrorists who are incarcerated and talks to them, has these correspondence, and asks them what they think about, and will go to these places and so forth. So that's what's going on right now at the Suburban. What do I want to tell you about the Suburban? It's been going on for quite a long time. We moved out to Oak Park in 1997. I had 3 kids. I have 3 kids. 2 of them went through the public schools. 1 of them is in the public school. So the Suburban and its longevity is really tied to a kind of domestic scenario. My husband is also an artist. I think we need to talk about our resources, and maybe we'll get back, we'll at some point be a little more specific in terms of some of the pragmatic questions that maybe you will have. But the Suburban is not a not-for-profit space. We had the opportunity of folding it in when we decided that the Poor Farm was going to be a not-for-profit exhibition space, but we decided not, that we would leave it as this kind of free-floating space. So I think that's all I have to say. We do have Poor Farm Press, and I have bunches of books on my lap. 10 years of exhibitions at the Poor Farm. We've worked, or excuse me, at the Suburban. We've worked, sorry, I don't want to, I can kill you, with over 200 artists to date. Some other publications, a nice project that we ended up doing last year. I quite enjoyed this project. I was invited to do an exhibition at Yale, and what we ended up doing is inviting all the artists who have ever shown at the Poor Farm and the Suburban, and asked them to write jokes about the space. So it's Why Did the Chicken Cross the Road? Original jokes about the Suburban and the Poor Farm by the artists who have exhibited there. So we have this collection of little jokes, which is pretty great. And I think maybe that speaks to some of the kind of conceptual underpinnings of both spaces where we're not fully embracing institutional critique, but at the same time we're interested in how we can play in the kind of undercutting our own identity. We're happy to do that. I think that's enough. Cool. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry. Hi, I'm Laura Schaefer. A couple tough acts to follow. So I don't know if you're starting out, I think, at Home Gallery. Right now I run Southside Hub of Production in Hyde Park, but I think my little attempt at a PowerPoint that I presented in Finland starts out at the Home Gallery. I was invited, actually I had been wanting to go to Finland for a long time, and luckily I was kind of invited to go there this summer to give a few talks about creative neighborhood skills by my friend and conceptual artist Andrew Patterson there, whom I met about 7 years ago at the Pedagogical Factory exhibition, which was really very inspiring. I actually met Andrew doing the project The Home Gallery. I started the Home Gallery in 2009. Sorry. No, 2006. I'm sorry. So I should go back a little bit further. When I first came back I lived in Berlin for about 13 years. Then I came back here to Chicago and went through a little bit of a culture shock coming back here. And I decided to open up a space mostly because I wanted to get to know Chicago and the art scene here and see if I could find some like-minded people. So I started Can Gallery in 1999. Sorry, numbers, can't remember them. In 1999, and that was just a basically kind of classic 2,000 square foot alternative project space, excuse me. And we had some really interesting shows. We had a lot of people coming right out of school, and we had Conrad Freiberg when he first graduated. He showed his little mechanical kinetic sculptures, and it was really wonderful. But I soon realized that the level of engagement that people showed in that gallery space with art actually was kind of uninspiring. There were a lot of young people between like 20 and 27, and a lot of smoking at that time and drinking, and people were just kind of not really engaged, but there till 3 or 4 in the morning. So I decided that that might not be exactly what I wanted to do with my life, and did that for about a year, and I stopped. That coincided with the pregnancy of my first child, which also led me to believe that living in a loft space with rats and homeless people coming up my stairs into my apartment on a regular basis was probably not the best way to start the life of this child. So I stopped kind of being involved with the art world for a few years to raise my kids. And then we moved here to Hyde Park. I went there to Hyde Park. And that's when I realized that it was about time that I kind of started to get to know a new community there. I didn't know anyone at all, and felt very isolated with 2 little kids at home, and felt that that was a good way to, again, get to know who's out there and who are my neighbors and try to make some connections. So I started Home Gallery. My husband and I opened up our house for 3 years, about 3 to 4 times a year. We invited an artist or sometimes a group of artists to come and exhibit their work throughout the house. We didn't isolate the work from our kitchen or our bathrooms or the bathroom, one bathroom, and basement and other rooms. And we kind of approached it as an experiment to see what it would be like to live inside of a gallery and what it would be like to have people and strangers in our home to view work, and would they engage differently with the work if they were in your home, and what is the difference between being a kind of gallerist figure or a curator and a host. That proved to be quite interesting in the end. However, so this is Anders Nilsson, who had a wonderful show at our house. And we opened up with the artists always being present, and we had lots of delicious food, and it was all self-funded and self-run, and so it was pretty simple. And at the end, we'd have a brunch and ask the artist to give a talk. We can kind of go quickly through some of these slides. They're just various artists interacting with various spaces in the house. My family also interacting with the art, and my neighbors coming by on a regular basis to see what's going on. I got to know my neighbors very well in those 3 years, and it was kind of the place for them to go. And it was really nice because Hyde Park is known for some really wonderful institutions, obviously the Smart Museum, Hyde Park Art Center, Renaissance Society, but it doesn't really have any small experimental gallery spaces. So that's another reason why I felt like in order for me to live in my community and feel connected to my community, I had to be able to provide something that I needed personally in my community, which was a small, independently run, experimental art space. So that's when I started the Op Shop, mostly because I had to get out of my private space. My kids were kind of tired of having the home gallery. So the way I went about that was just to try to find out who owns all of the vacant spaces around Hyde Park. There were many, many at that time. That was in 2009, and there were a lot of vacant spaces in our neighborhood. Most owned by the university, and many by Mac Realty. So I got to know the realtor, or the Peter Castle from Mac Realty. I'm not a very fast speaker, I'm sorry. But I just told him about my idea. Well, could we possibly rent a space for a short period of time for a nominal fee? And had talked to him about that for about a year until I serendipitously ran into him on the street, and I said, we want that space now, basically. And he said, okay. And then he took us to this space right here. He said, you can rent this for a month for $1. And I said, well, I thought that sounded like a good deal. And so it was a big, white, beautiful space. We didn't really have to do too much. And I told him that we would leave it in better condition than we found it, and we need 45 days instead of a month. And he said yes. So, and that started the Op Shop. The idea behind the Op Shop was to kind of create a space of surprise in the neighborhood. I really needed some surprises myself, and I figured other people probably did as well. So this vacant space, which had been boarded up and kind of depressing probably for people to walk by for a long period of time, was now opened. We took down the boards on the windows, we cleaned everything, and we filled it with some really interesting art projects that I had seen recently. I went over to SIC actually, and I went to their open studios. And they had about 200 open studios, and I found 5 or 6 people who were doing kind of interactive art practices that required people to talk to each other in order to make the work come to life. So I invited them to kind of kick off the space, and then I kind of opened it up to the community, and people started bringing work in, people started meeting there, and it kind of took an organic quality from then on. I decided that I wanted to try to utilize the space as much as possible because it was empty, and I wanted to kind of talk about the fact that we're leaving these spaces empty, and for what reasons, and for how long, and what happens to space when it's not cared for. And so I basically encouraged the community to get involved by reaching out and telling us about what kind of programs they would want, what kind of programs they're interested in, and who's out there. Are you a musician? Do you want to play? So we had everything from poetry readings to book releases to dinners, concerts, and yeah, durational performances. This is Kiku Hibino. These are the Fleming brothers. And the beautiful mural on the wall was by Anders Nilsson, was also really fantastic. So that went by, and I thought, well, now what am I going to do? Because the 45 days were over, and I realized that I had spent 45 entire days in this storefront, and it was a bit overwhelming. And it was difficult to get volunteers. That's one of the problems that I'm sure everybody comes across with no funding. So I didn't think I would do another one, but I decided that I would, because a lot of people, I was really surprised by the fact that a lot of people really enjoyed it in their neighborhood. And so a few months later, after kind of reflecting on all of what happened in 45 days, we found the next space. This is the next space. This is the second op shop, and I'm going to have to go a little bit quicker, I think, because I'm moving too slow. And that was a really horrible Hollywood video store. It had been closed up for years. It was disgusting, really, and molded, and we had to clean a lot. But it was worth it. It was about 7,000 square feet, and we mostly did alternative economic projects, or projects about alternative economies, and various other kind of needs that we thought that the neighborhood needed. We opened a thrift store there. We had had their first garden exchange project there, which is right here. And we had mural painting by the neighborhood high school, all kinds of things like that. And that's Conrad Freiberg was playing. So we can kind of leaf through this real quick. That's when we first started our potluck dinners. And this is the third op shop, which was my favorite, I think. But I realized that it was really difficult to get, more and more difficult to get volunteers, and I just could not be in there every day. So I came up with a strategy of 30 days, 30 people, and I invited 30 people to take 30 days, and each person could do whatever they wanted and run the space in whatever way they wanted for one day. That worked out really amazingly well. So we set up an installation that was very, very flexible. We made our own tables that folded down, and I went to houses in the neighborhood and borrowed 30 or 40 folding chairs from people, and we set up this kind of shaker-style hanging system. It's a little tango dance. So we'd have everything there from tango to cabaret to, and we paired also, we also found that it was very difficult to get audiences for performances, especially on the South Side. So we paired them with potluck dinners. We invited somebody in the neighborhood to have a potluck dinner, invite all of their friends, and then we had a performance artist have a performance. And they went together, and so the performance artists always had an audience, and the audience had wonderful cultural entertainment. So we can kind of go through these. That's a video. That was our Kickstarter, which was successful, luckily. I can talk about that later. Oh,
Do you want
I don't think so, because I don't think we have much time.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm sorry. So this is the fourth op shop before the current project. This was another storefront. Obviously, at that point, I decided that I had to keep going. And we were offered another space. And each time we had a space, it was a different kind of negotiation for how much we would pay and how long we would be there. We were here for 2 months. It was springtime. I got in touch with Amber Ginsberg and Leo Rousset, and we wanted to make a greenhouse. Yes. And that's what that's happened there. We have to go very quickly now to the last project. That was a really nice, sprout sitters. We called them sprout sitters. This is the last, I'm going to go really quickly about this, but it's currently still available to see, so you can go there. And we have an opening October 6th. This is Shop Southside Hub of Production, and I started this project with John Preuss. We had been talking a lot about various ideas, and we came to the conclusion that moving around was really great, which it is, but settling down for a little bit to kind of nurture some ideas would also be an important move. So it took us a couple of years, but we finally got the church next door to give us this big 16-room mansion for what is now on its second year. And we renovated it and turned it into a local, independently run arts and cultural center for the community. I can stop there, and you can just run through the pictures and check us out then online to see the rest.
How long will that one last?
Well, that's the current situation is fairly frustrating and kind of precarious. We've been kind of, basically 6 months into our year, we were told that the space was put on the market. It was actually, had a big sign in the front yard and everything, so it was up for sale. And we were supposed to, we didn't know whether we had to leave in 1 or 2 months, but it's still not sold. And the situation now is that there is a gentleman who wants to buy the building. He's 89. He's an amazing person in the community of Hyde Park, and he wants to buy the building so that he can secure it for a public space and an independent cultural center, and he would sign a lease with us for the next 5 to 10 years. The problem is that it's attached at the rear all the way up to the church, and it's very difficult property to actually sell. There's a lot of confusion as to where the property lines actually are, and so that's kind of slowing things down, and it might be difficult for him, to buy the building, actually, in which case we may not stay. If he didn't buy it, we wouldn't stay, I guess is what I'm saying. So we're still kind of waiting on that. In the meantime, we've renewed our lease a couple of times and get kind of 3-month extensions. Teresa was, her wonderful installation was just there. Yeah, so we did all kinds of projects from social activist projects there to classes and courses and workshops and shows. Sorry for the extraordinarily long-winded presentation.
I'll go fast. I can't really go slow. This is Acre. I'm going to talk about our cooperative, and the slides can go really fast, too, because there are too many of them. So we're artists, cooperative, residency, and exhibitions. And so then I'm going to talk about each of those things and what they do. It's kind of a cheesy way to go about it, but right. This is the first group picture we took, and right, it shows the staff and residents of our residency program, all of whom are artists, and that is defined right as artists, musicians, etc. So you can scroll through and see some artists doing art things, and they come out there to do so. We support artists from all over the country, and growingly more and more from outside of the country. So these are some weird things that they do out there. If we stop at that last one, maybe, this is one of the more recent, bigger projects. This is an Estonian swing, which is made by Christina Pabis and Matt Nichols. It's really scary to go on, and I'm really glad it's not on the property. It's on a neighboring property that can be locked at night. It's a traditional Estonian swing, and they built it in 6 days, and then the rest of those days, residents went over and swang on it. It can hold 3 or 4 people on each side, but that gets really scary. But it's really fun too, and these horses that are on that property just stare at you while you do this weird thing. But yeah, that sort of stuff happens. Regular art practices, musicians come a lot, and all sorts of abnormal art practices happen. So we are cooperative. That's the second part of the acronym. This is us trying to build, actually building a tent that we used the first year because we didn't have enough space on this farm that I'll get to talking about later. So I guess that we go out to this area in Wisconsin, which is called the Driftless region, which is too far from Poor Farm to ever really get out there very efficiently. But it's in southwest Wisconsin, and it's sort of this area in Wisconsin where people have gone, and you can scroll through these until you get to the next one. People have gone out there, not very many. It's a very sparsely populated area, but it's a big sort of back to the land area, and folks have gone out there sort of to live cooperatively and communally in big apple picking cooperatives. There are 2 different co-ops in the very next town of any size, and then the town one further it was like the first solar town in the world, so it was powered all by solar in the mid-70s. Okay, so this is cool. Maybe at the end of each one I'll talk about something that happened last summer. Here, mainly 2 people, an Austrian resident named Helmut and one of our staff members called Phil Kaufman, built a brick oven for pizza cooking. But it was sort of like this big team effort. When we had to move that slab at the bottom, it was like 2,000 pounds, and it was like pyramid work. But it took them pretty much the whole summer with various sessions of residents helping out. But they finally got it. It's got exactly 356 bricks inside there, and they go in concentric circles. And the pizza is cooked in 60 to 90 seconds, and the oven stays at something like 800 degrees for 9 hours straight. So you can cook a lot of pizzas, and it's probably like, well, the chefs were not like, I don't know, the chefs had reservations, but then they saw that we cooked really good food for 60 people really cheaply and really well with this crazy thing. They were kind of, and they didn't have to do it. They were happy with that. So it was great, and it remains there. And we only got to have 1 pizza night because it took so long, but that was sort of this big cooperative effort, and everybody made their own pizza. In general, the food aspect of the farm is sort of one that sort of takes its cues from the cooperative sort of nature of the region, and so we sort of source food locally, cook and eat together, teach each other these creative skills, work together on manifold projects and investigations. I'm reading now if you can't tell. Summers are filled with visiting artist lectures, workshops, concerts, campfires, and conversations with new friends. And then back in Chicago, we work with our resident staff and all these partner institutions to grow this big, large, more permanent community here in Chicago. So I'll talk a little bit more specifically about the residency and then what we do in Chicago. So a lot of these photos are old. Forgive me, we didn't replace them yet, but some of them are new. So we have at the residency a recording studio, various studio spaces that are just sort of general use in these little cabins. And all the buildings out there are sort of built from salvaged timbers. This is our new wood shop, which is big and outdoors. And then adjacent to it is like an acre or 2 of salvaged timbers, which are collected by the property owners. And if they can handle lumber that size, residents can work with any of that. This is our new screen printing building, built from some of those timbers. There are some prints, and that's a field. And that's our new kitchen. That is our old screening space and some old programming. That's people walking in the landscape. It's 1,000 acres. There's a pond. It's spring-fed, all the water. This is where people stay. This is Duncan doing a Bad at Sports thing with 2 Canadian art doctors. And we have a radio station, or maybe had. We are in trouble with the FCC right now, but while it lasted, it was really great. And we broadcast 24 hours a day and into the neighboring towns. And anyone could be a DJ, except when Duncan was there, when he was the only DJ. But he was a great DJ. VJ, I don't know. So did I miss anything? Okay, so the stats, right? Simply and quickly, about 80 people come per year. It's 25 to 30 per session. There are 3 sessions. They stay for 12 days, which we think is an amount of time that folks with day jobs can actually, if they really want to do it, come out. We try to keep it accessible for both price-wise and time-wise. So, you know, it's not Skowhegan, but we aren't Skowhegan. And so, right, it's 1,000 acres. We talked about those numbers. Yeah. Oh, it costs about $500 for 2 weeks of food, room, and board, and 30% of the folks who come have scholarships or work studies. So I don't want to ever say that because I want it to be free, but we try as badly as we can, you know, to subsidize that as best we can. It costs a lot more to rent and run that space. And soon, everyone can come for free, I promise. I don't know. Exhibitions. So we have the space in Pilsen, and then we work with 12 partner exhibition spaces, and that lineup changes slightly each year, but each of those partner spaces gets to pick from our roster of residents, usually around 4 people to show over the course of their exhibition schedule. Usually they're just shown as part of, the way they do their exhibitions. Typically, sometimes they do something different. So I could list those, but that's boring. You can read about it elsewhere. But what else do I talk about with the exhibitions? So we just changed our exhibition model. This is our very first exhibition. You can see a map of the whole property on the wall done by Rebecca Meir. It took a number of coats of paint to finish. The space is in like Damon and 18th. And we had, for the first 2 years, sort of like Sunday Soup, we had exhibitions every Sunday. So an artist would come in, get the keys to the space, install, get the show up. We would have a Sunday opening, 4 hours of open hours, and then they would deinstall and give the key to the next person so we could accommodate all these people. It was a good run, and it was exciting and exhausting. This year we are working with 4 curators, each of whom is programming a season. So they'll have sort of like a curatorial arc. We are all artists, but the one thing none of us are curators, and none of us want to be that. We can do everything else, but we're not going to curate. So these curators are cool, and I guess they're part of We, but they're this other committee. And they're pairing artists up for duo shows in our space that will last for 3 weeks. There are a number of rationales for that. It includes like public accessibility, critics wanting to write about things and not being able to if the show will be down by the time the thing is published. But it's exciting to see what the curators do with this pool of artists. So that's what this guy looks like, but it's a doctored image. So we aren't open, as I used to be able to say, every Sunday, but we are open rather often, and we'll have our calendar out this week, I think. So lots and lots of exhibitions. You'll get to see artists from all over the place, and we have an awesome, great, not that every year wasn't awesome, but this year was like super high caliber artists. We had a huge number of applications, and we're able to be really selective, which hurts, but we have a 50-person panel, and so it's not me that picks. And that makes it better. We're a nonprofit. We're all artists. None of us get paid. That's Acre.
Wow.